let's go and have a look. So we've opened up Illustrator. We go to File and New to create our new project. We're going to choose Web because this is a web application that we're going to be creating, or it's a file that we're going to export for the web. We don't need to worry about the sizes at the moment. We can leave it as web large is fine. Because we're using vector graphics with this, it's all going to rescale anyway. So let's choose Create. What you may notice when you first open it, there is quite a lot happening. There's lots of menus and colors and items all over the screen. That can be a little bit daunting, a bit complicated for you to begin with. So if you're not confident yet, what I suggest you do is go to Window, go to Workspace and change it to Essentials. What that will do is remove quite a few of the extra things that are on the screen and leave us just with the very minimum tools that we need to make Illustrator work. As you get more involved with Illustrator, you may want to start adding in some of the other windows and things that you can access to make it easier. So we now have our desktop already in Illustrator. You'll notice on the left hand side we have all our tools. This is the tools menu or the tools bar. We have the name of the file they're actually working with at the moment. Now it hasn't been named yet, it's just left as untitled. So if we go to File and Save, we can save this as Demo 1 will do, and select Save. We don't need to change any settings, we can just go OK. You'll notice it's renamed it to Demo 1 now, and it's telling us the view percentage. So that's how far in or out we've viewed this particular page. I was just moving that in and out by pinching the touch screen or the touch area on the tablet. You can actually zoom in and out as well using the percentages down the bottom here. So you can fit to screen, or you can choose a percentage size that you want from the bottom left. That's down in the bottom left corner. Now the other area that is important over here are the tabs. In this case we have a Properties, we have Layers, and we have a Libraries tab. Now one thing Illustrator is very clever with, and that is a thing called artboards. And artboards allow you to work on sort of sections of a project in separate areas. It's like having different pages really. So if you do go to, if you don't have anything selected, you'll have the artboards area. It says no selection, it's telling you about the document, and we're looking at artboard number 1. We haven't created any other artboards, but we can select Edit and resize the artboard from here if we need to. Once you're finished, select Exit. So that was the settings for our Illustrator file. If you want to have multiple artboards on there, you can then go and add extra artboards as well. We're just going to leave it at 1 to reduce the complication. The next thing is Layers. It's the Layers tab. We'll look at Layers in a moment. Then Libraries as well, which we'll look at Libraries when we start using some of the library part for our objects. So that's the basic layout, including our menus up the top. So File, Edit, Object Type, Select, Effect, View, Window, and Help. You'll get used to all of those as we work through them. We're now going to look at the Tools area. So this is the Tools bar on the left hand side. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what some of these tools do so that you're ready when we start working on our projects. So to start with, we have the Selection tool, and that's one that you use quite a bit. You'll go back to that to select objects, select text, select any of the content that's on the screen that you need to move around. We have the Pen tool that you can choose here, and that allows you to start drawing shapes. So if you click on the screen, you can just draw different shapes and join those up as well, and that becomes a completed object of its own, made up of a collection of paths. So again, this is a vector image, so you can zoom in and out and it doesn't lose its quality. So that's the Pen tool. Then we have the Curvature tool. If we choose that, you can then click on objects or close to them, and you can curve the edges of things. So we can curve those, we can choose a path, click on here, and you can see how you can turn things into curves. And that's quite useful when you're creating your vector images, and we'll make a lot of use of that. The next tool is the Shapes tool. In this case, it's a rectangle. Now you notice something here. There's a little arrow just beside it, a little icon just at the bottom right corner. That means that if you click and hold, it shows you some other options. We have that with some of the ones above as well, but we can draw a rectangle by choosing the rectangle and just click and drag on the screen to draw a rectangle. We can also click and hold, choose the Ellipse tool, and we can create an ellipse. If you want to change that to a perfect circle, hold Shift and resize, and that will keep it as a perfect circle. The same with the rectangle. If we want to make that a square, if we hold Shift, it will resize and make sure it's a perfect square. So you can see the dimensions there, 170, 178. And obviously we have the Polygon tool. So that allows you to create a polygon, which can have different amounts of sides as well. So we'll look at that. And the last one, second last one, is the star tool, which gives us a star. And again, you can choose how many points on the star that you want to have. Then we have the line tool, or line segment, that lets you do exactly that. It's draw a line. Now, if you are drawing a line and you want to make sure the line is exactly straight, meaning it is level, if you hold Shift again, it will force, so even though I'm moving the mouse around, it will force that line to stay exactly parallel across the screen. If you do draw it and you move it to an angle, it will go to 45 degrees. Then it will move itself around to being any sort of 45 degree angle difference each time. So it just jumps between them. This is the Paintbrush tool. That again, it's a vector image, so I can draw or paint lines. Notice it smooths them out automatically for you as well. There's some settings for that. To be able to edit those lines, if I go up here to the direct selection tool, click on that, and click on the line, I can now move the edges of the line around. So remember I showed you how that works with vectors. That's what we can do with that second, button. So that's the direct selection tool. Going a bit further down, we have our text tool, and basically that allows us to create text. And that's really, really tiny text here. So I'm just going to highlight that text, and down on the bottom right, I can then choose a larger font. There we go. So we have some text. We also have our rotation tool, and rotation tool is quite logical. Choose the rotation tool, and we can basically rotate things around the center line of the object. So notice that center is just there. If I align the text center and then rotate, it's rotating around the center. Again, if I do this while holding Shift, it will go 45 degrees straight across, 90 degrees, 180. That's our rotate tool. We have an eraser tool, which does exactly that. Notice that erase line I just did there has now broken that into two objects. So I can sort of cut things apart, and now we have two separate paths instead, and we'll make use of that later as well. If we create a rectangle, you can see down here that we have the fill and stroke. And fill is basically, if we double click, we can choose a color and say okay, and it fills it with that color. If we now choose the stroke, double click on that and choose a color. So we'll just make that green stroke there. And if we just zoom in a bit, you can see it's got a slight green edge around it. I'm just going to make that a bit larger so it's easier to see. There we go. So we have a red object with a green border. We can use this little button here that says swap fill and stroke, and that inverts them or reverses them. So we now have a green fill with a red, green fill with a red line or red stroke, or the other way around. We also have the default fill, which switches it back. In this case, the default is white, and it does have a border, yes, it has a thin border. Let's say we've decided we've created this new box, it's green, but we want it to be that purple, exactly the same as that purple, but we're not sure what color that is. We can use the eyedropper. So if we select the object that we want to fill, we choose the eyedropper and then choose the purple down here, it will automatically fill that object with that color. So the eyedropper is there to help you find and match colors, which is really, really useful. And that is the main items in the toolbar that we will use. As we go through our designs, you'll get to use more of those tools, and you'll certainly understand them and get used to working with them really quickly. We're now going to look at the tabs over on the right hand side, and the first one is the Properties tab. The Properties tab changes content depending on what you have selected. If you don't have anything selected, for example, you choose the Selection tool and then click outside of the artboard, you'll then see no selection over on the right and the artboard information. It tells you what guidelines and guides and different things are actually available. We're going to leave that at the moment and look at the properties in relation to some of the different objects that we're going to use. So the first one, if we choose the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle on the artboard, you will see that the properties have now changed to rectangle, and then we have a collection of properties. So we have transform, the width and the height, and you'll see 3 dots, and that gives you more options that relate to the transformation. We also have appearance, things like the fill color. So you can change the fill color over here. You can change the fill color here as well. There is some extra options. If you click on the 3 dots relating to appearance as well, you can click on that. We have the alignment, and that's the alignment in relation to the whole artboard. If we click on align here, center, it's moved it centered horizontally. We can also click on the vertical align center as well, and that'll center it vertically. If we have more than one object selected, then the align works in relation to the other objects. We'll look at that as we use them in our designs. If we change to, for example, the Polygon tool, and we draw a polygon on the screen, there's our polygon there. If we go to the transform options here, you'll see it has things like rotate. So you can choose the rotation. We'll move it back around to 0. We can also go under appearance, click on the 3 dots, and it will let us choose our color, the stroke, which is the border. So we can change the border color as well, if we like, and the border thickness. All of that can be changed from here, or it can be changed just here as well. That's for our Polygon tool. One other important thing with the Polygon tool is if we click on the 3 dots, you'll see here at the top, it has the polygon side count. And we can either move that bar along, and you'll see it changes down to 3. 3 is going to be the smallest, which is a triangle. So if we create a triangle, we can do that by changing the number of sides on the polygon. Obviously, you can take that right up to 20 and down to 3, which gives us our triangle. So that's how we can change our shapes. Obviously, a 4-sided polygon gives you a square or rectangle. So that's how our properties work. If we go to text, so we can add some text by choosing add text. So that's our text tool. Drawing a box, you can see there that we have some text in there now. Over on the right, the properties bar or properties tab has now changed to type. We can change the fill color. We can change our whole heap of settings here. We can also change the font to a font that we like to use, whichever one, doesn't matter. Choose a font that works for you. We can also change the font size and more information about the font. So spacing between lines can be increased as well or decreased. So those are all the different options that you can use. The center align, if I just move that over a bit to here. If we use center, you can see it moves all the text to the center. If we keep going across even further, it has justify, and justify spaces the writing out so that it lines up left and right, but it also chops words up. So you just have to be careful of that. And then we also have our vertical line as well. So if we click here inside the box or the shape that the text is sitting in, we can have it sitting at the top, we can have it sitting centered, or we can have it sitting at the bottom of the box, or we can have it justified so it spreads it out evenly across the whole area of that text. We also have our page align, so that's aligned to the center, aligned to the center again, but remember it's talking about the whole box, not just the text in it. So if I make that smaller and then realign it, it will move it again. So they're the main properties that we need to do with in relation to shapes and to text. We'll leave it there for those properties at the moment because we need to look at layers next. Okay, we're going to look at layers, and layers are a tab over on the right hand side. We're going to put a square in here, and we might make that a green. Let's change colour again. There we go, nice blue. We're also going to let's create another one, another rectangle, and this one we might change its colour to green, and one more. And this one we will make, let's choose a nice, here we go, that pink there will do, or whatever that colour is. So we have 3 objects, 3 squares on our page. If we go to layers and we click on the drop down arrow, you'll see that we have a rectangle, and a rectangle, all three of them. Notice the position of each one in the layers. The red is at the top. So if I move the red over the top of the other two, you'll see that it's actually sitting above, and that's because the layers work in the context of the top layer in the list sits at the top, and as you get further down, it goes further down below. At the moment, the blue is the very bottom rectangle, so it will sit below everything else. If I wanted to move that to the top, by clicking and dragging up to the top, you can see now that the blue sits above everything else. So that's how layers are ordered. You'll also notice that as I select each layer, so if I select the blue layer, you'll see a little icon appear around this circle here, and that's telling me that I've selected that particular layer. So if I change anything in relation to that layer, it will happen because I've got that layer selected. If I hold Shift and click on the second one, you'll see that two of them are selected now. The blue and the pink one are selected. I can obviously select the blue, hold Shift and select the green, and now you can see the outside two are selected. Now, because layers are also used for grouping, if I right click and go to Group, you'll now see that it's changed over here in the layers. We have a layer group. And the layer group means that I can move those two together at the same time. So they're now in a group, or I can still individually select. So if I go inside that group, notice up the top here it says group now. I'm inside that group. I can now move this object. Notice they're still in order. So the green's at the bottom, blue's at the top. And I can swap those around inside the group. Then when I finish with that, I can click over on the top left onto layer, and it'll take me back to the top layer. Notice again, if I click on these now, they're grouped together. So they stay as a group, and everything relating to that group happens together all at once. If I added some text to this, so let's say I just grab some text and I move the text around, notice that the text layer, which is this one here, and I'll just move it over a little bit for you, the text layer, and I might rename the writing and put in this is some text. Notice that it actually changes that writing in here. The name of the layer becomes that name of that text. A couple of important things is with the text is that the text sits out when it's sitting over the top. The text also has a transparent background sitting over the top of both of those. So that's how text works as its own layer. I can also move that text into the group. So now that text is part of the whole group when I move it. Or I can take that out of the group. And put it right at the bottom. Because it's at the bottom now, it sits behind all of the objects. Except when it's not actually sitting behind them. That's how layers work. And we can just keep adding layer after layer after layer. You can also hide layers. So for example, if I don't want that text anymore there, I can click on the little eye symbol beside the text and that will hide it. I can also lock a layer. And by locking a layer, you click on the side, it puts a little padlock there. That means that I now can't move that layer anywhere. I can't select it, I can't move it, it's locked. If I lock a grouped layer, so for example this group here, that whole group is now locked. I can't move any of those around. So that's how we stop, once we have things in position, we don't want them moved, it's really handy to just lock those layers or group layers and then lock them. Or you can hide them and show them as groups as well, so that'll hide and show everything in one group. Or you can individually hide a single layer inside a group. But this is really useful because once you get things in position, you don't want them moving around. So that's a very basic introduction of how layers work. Did you know that you can export Adobe Illustrator files into your web page? In this course, Introduction to Adobe Illustrator for Web Developers, I'll teach you introductory techniques on how to use Adobe Illustrator. So if you're very new to it, I'll teach you how to use it, but I'll then also show you how to export the Adobe Illustrator file into an SVG file, which is a scalable vector graphics file. This file will allow you to convert the graphic into HTML and then display it in your content. And as it says, scalable vector graphics. The graphics are vectors. They can be scaled, so as you resize, the images resize and rescale with it absolutely beautifully. It is real text, because it's using HTML. You can also apply styles to the text, you can apply styles to the colors of objects, and you can reposition things, and you can also add JavaScript as well. So I'll have a little section at the end to show you how you can go about adding some of those HTML and CSS components to your graphics. You can see here these are the graphics that we're going to go through. We'll learn how to create the topics. Design, we'll go through the 5 steps of success, what to do with your life, and then the last one, health, where I'll take you through and show you how to create each of these icons as well, which you can create as separate icons for your content. So this is the course. It's called Introduction to Adobe Illustrator for Web Developers. I look forward to taking you through the process. I will see you in the course.